Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a 1932 movie called A Farewell to Arms. This is a Frank Borzage adaptation of the Ernest Hemingway novel starring Gary Cooper, Helen Hayes. It's based on Hemingway's own experiences during World War I when he was an ambulance driver for the Red Cross. In this movie, Gary Cooper is a American in the Italian army with the ambulance corps. He has a relationship with the nurse, played by Helen Hayes. He has been a carouser, womanizer, loves to drink, but his experience, his relationship with this nurse is something else again, and they have sort of a mystical, ethereal kind of romance. They know right away that they are meant for each other. There's no getting around the fact that they have a physical relationship as well as a spiritual relationship. This was the days of the pre-code days, it's called, but there was a code, and much would be objected to this relationship and the way it's depicted, but in the end they let most of it stand anyways, which when the film was released and later on in the 1930s, when the code was stringently enforced, they had to make a good many cuts in order to re-release it to the movie theaters. So it's set in Italy, it's World War I. We see a lot of the carnage of World War I in the film. World War I was not considered by most people to be a heroic war. It was seen sort of as a senseless slaughterhouse. A few years after this, of course, we have World War II, and that was seen one of those rare wars that can be seen afterward as a heroic war. But the general mood of people in the United States and really all across the world was that that war was just an awful war that took away a whole generation of young men and served no useful purpose. But nationalism was on the rise again in 1932. Mussolini had been in power in Italy. Hitler had just come to power. So there were political pressures from overseas as to whether you're going to besmirch the Italian nation, and it's amazing how films ever even got made, because in the United States you had the code that was constantly on your tail, the analyzing the screenplays and telling you what you can and cannot show, mostly from a morality standpoint. And this has with sex out of wedlock, and there's a pregnancy, and so there was much to object here from the morality standpoint, not to mention a desertion, as the Gary Cooper character eventually deserts the Italian army in order to get to his to find his lover. And you also had pressure from the studio itself. The studios always wanted a happy ending. They didn't think audiences wanted sad endings. And Hemingway, of course, the novel has a sad ending. And it was a huge success. Came out, I think, in 1929. It had been serialized, came out in book form, big bestseller, Broadway play. But it was thought to be perhaps it wasn't filmable because of these more adult type of subject matter, and you wouldn't be able to find two more opposite figures than Frank Borzage and Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway was spare in his dialogue. This is a first-person narration. Everything is seen from his point of view. His relationship with the nurse in the novel versus the way Borzage portrays it. Borzage doesn't believe in this pessimism about love and relationships, and he sees it as the transcendent moment in people's lives, and so he kind of exalts it in both the spiritual and in the physical sense in this movie. And Borzage in later years thought that this was his best film, and Hemingway probably would have laughed at that. And he thought, and Borzage would have also, and Hemingway would have also laughed at Borzage's statement that this was the most faithful adaptation of a novel that Hollywood had ever done. And in a sense, it kind of is, considering some of the awful and all the liberties taken with some of the greatest literature in silent film and really up to today. But Borzage instead supplies, imbues the film with his creative genius, really. I mean, there's scenes of just absolute brilliance and that almost seem as if, and they definitely were not in the book. I read the book, reread it a couple years ago, and Borzage really does stick to the spirit, not the spirit of the novel, but to the bare bones of the plot of the novel, the narrative of the novel. But it's not so much a farewell to arms as Hemingway his character becoming a pacifist, anti-war. It's farewell to the world itself, and Borzage is too oppressive for the needs of love and happiness and farewell to honor. In all of Borzage's movies, there is friendship, and so it was an integral part of the plot, even if it's on the sidelines. Here, Cooper's best friend is played by Adolphe Menjou, who plays a doctor, and he is a real womanizer crowd who doesn't believe in love whatsoever. Fire and smoke on the inside, nothing on the outside, nothing on the inside is Menjou's motto, and he's jealous, and of course these kind of intense same-sex relationships, and especially in modern times, are seen with this kind of gay subtext, and it's certainly there, and it really does provide a great deal of interest into the movie. And he's jealous. Menjou is jealous. He wants Gary Cooper for himself, and Helen Hayes has a similar friend who is very much anti-men. What are you doing getting involved with this soldier? They're only out for one thing. Borzage, like I say, Borzage imbues the film with a great deal of his own style. There's a brilliant point of view sequence where he comes into a sort of dome-shaped building when he is injured with shrapnel wounds, and so everything is seen from his point of view. In his book on Borzage, Hervé Dumas goes very into great detail of how this whole sequence plays into Borzage's Freemasonry, and it's really a brilliant conception. Of course, you don't need to know anything about Freemasonry to enjoy this sequence, but it is really a beautiful sequence. And there's another sequence later on where he's wounded, and Helen Hayes is nursing him, and a friend, Cooper's friend, a priest, comes to visit him, and he understands the relationship, and there's an unsought-for and impromptu and not quite unofficial marriage type ceremony that goes on, and then but when the priest realizes the depth of this relationship, if they got married, they would have to go home. But then the war just deteriorates even more. And now we have this great sequence, and it's the great sequence in the novel as well, when Cooper deserts to get to his love. There's just incredible visual detail of the horrors of war. Some of this was designed by Gene Negulesco, who later became a Hollywood director. He sort of did the second unit work. He complained that when Borzage came on the set, he was all into Cooper, and like only about 5 minutes of this of this design was used in the final film, but it's a stunner. I mean, there's just the sheer horrors of the retreat and the defeat and the retreat. And Cooper taken by the military police and about to be executed for desertion, and his harrowing escape. We see images of planes strafing and bombing, and one particularly horrific image of a cemetery with crosses as far as the eye can see being itself bombed by these overhead planes. So then we come to the finale, and here's where Borzage really amps up the romanticism. I find it a beautiful ending, and what's interesting about this ending is that the studio was wary of releasing the film with this with this sad ending, so they had Niculesco, because Borzage wanted no part of it, to film a happy ending. And they took out, Borzage uses music from Wagner. They take that out, and they imply a happy ending. Now, and both were offered to the distributors, but as far as Dumont can ascertain, in all the big cities, the Borzage's version played. In some small towns, rural America, the happy ending played. And overseas, wherever it played overseas, it was also Borzage's version. It had trouble playing overseas. Mussolini banned it, Austria banned it, Hitler banned it. What's really strange is that this happy ending version was the one that played on television in America. And it played on television a lot because it was in the public. It became part of the public domain. So when I first saw it in the theater, I couldn't believe I couldn't believe the ending. I said, wait a minute, I don't remember this ending, and because it was not so. And also, when the film was released on VHS, it was the happy ending. You know, in DVD, it was then returned to Borzage's original version, which was thought for a while to be lost, but David Selznick owned a 35 millimeter nitrate copy of the film that he had gotten when he remade Farewell to Arms in the 1950s with his wife Jennifer Jones and Rock Hudson. And this transfer on this film is really beautiful for a 1932 film. It's just, the restoration is just gorgeous. As it's soft focus photography. Charles Lang he later would do Peter Ibbotson, and the Ghost of Mrs. Muir, and it's just got so many fantastic images in it. Unfortunately, there is no commentary, there's no extras whatsoever on this Kino Lorber edition of A Farewell to Arms. So most of this information that I've been imparting to you about the film, and the film was a big success. It got mixed reviews. If you were a Hemingway lover, you were against the film. If you were indifferent to Hemingway, you probably were able to better appreciate the poetic imagery of Borzage's design of the film. But again, you know, it's nothing for a film of such amazing artistry. No extras given at all. So, you know, Frank, this Hervé Dumont book by Frank Borzage, I think the best chapter in the whole book is his explication, his appreciation, and his defense of the movie is a great work of art, which I think it is. So that'll about wrap this video up. I thank everybody, as always, for watching, and you guys take care, and I will catch you next time.